You had a tail, not a metaphor, not a vestige, an actual tail with vertebrae, with muscle, with the capacity to move. It grew out of the base of your spine, it curled, and for a brief window early in your development, it was simply part of your body, the way your hands are part of your body now. And then, around the 8th week after you were conceived, your own body killed it. The cells in that tail received a chemical signal, and they died. Deliberately. Programmed. The structure was reabsorbed, dissolved, dismantled from the inside, and by the time you were born, there was nothing left of it but a few fused bones at the base of your spine. A small, hard knot of vertebrae that serves almost no purpose and that you probably only think about when you fall on it. That's your tail. It's still there. It just stopped growing. Now, the obvious question is why? Why do you develop a tail and then destroy it? Why does your body go to the trouble of building a structure it has no intention of keeping? And the answer to that question turns out to be one of the strangest and most unsettling stories in the history of your species. A story that involves a genetic accident, a piece of DNA that jumped where it wasn't supposed to, and a price that you are still paying right now in your own spine. Let's start with the deep past. Around 25 million years ago, your ancestors had tails. This is not speculation. The fossil record on this is clear, and the genetic evidence is clearer still. The primates that eventually became us were tailed animals, and they used those tails the way tailed primates use them today. For balance, for communication, and in some species as an extra limb capable of gripping branches. If you have ever watched a monkey move through a forest canopy, you have watched a creature using a tail as a piece of precision equipment. It's a counterweight. It's a rudder. It's a stabilizer that allows an animal to make split-second corrections while moving at speed through three-dimensional space, 30 meters above the ground, where a single mistake means death. A tail for an arboreal primate is not decorative. It is survival hardware. And then, somewhere around 25 million years ago, in a population of ancestral primates in Africa, that hardware stopped being built. The apes, the lineage that would eventually produce gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and us, lost their tails. Every ape alive today is tailless. Gibbons, gorillas, chimps, bonobos, orangutans, humans. Not a single one has a tail. Meanwhile, monkeys, which are our close relatives, kept theirs. The split is clean and it is total. Something happened in that ancestral ape population, and for a long time the standard explanation was that it was an adaptation. That losing the tail conferred some advantage, that natural selection favored the taillessness, that it was, in some sense, an improvement. The story we told ourselves was that it was progress. The truth appears to be considerably less dignified. In 2024, a team of researchers published findings that reframed the entire question. They had been studying the genetics of tail development, the specific genes that instruct an embryo to build a tail. And they found something remarkable in the ape lineage. In a gene called TBXT, which is one of the master regulators of tail formation, they found an insertion, a piece of DNA that had jumped into the middle of the gene and lodged there. This piece of DNA is called an ALU element. ALU elements are what geneticists sometimes call jumping genes or transposable elements, short sequences of DNA that can copy themselves and insert into new locations in the genome. They are, in a sense, genetic parasites. They serve no function for the organism. They simply replicate and move, and the genome tolerates them, and over millions of years they accumulate. Roughly 10% of your entire genome is made of ALU elements. They are quite literally junk that got stuck in you. And at some point in an ancestral ape, one of these ALU elements jumped into the TBXT gene. It did not destroy the gene, it didn't shut it off. What it did was subtler and stranger. It altered the way the gene's instructions get assembled, causing the cell to sometimes produce a truncated version of the protein, a shortened, incomplete version of the signal that tells an embryo to build a tail. And when the researchers introduced this same genetic change into mice, the mice were born with shortened tails or no tails at all. That was it. That was the mechanism, not a gradual adaptation, not a slow refinement over millions of years of selective pressure. A piece of parasitic DNA fell into the wrong place in a gene in one individual, in one population 25 million years ago. And the result was an animal born without a tail. Now, and this is important, that alone doesn't explain why the change stuck. Mutations happen constantly. The overwhelming majority of them do nothing or do something harmful and vanish. For this one to spread through an entire lineage and become universal in all apes, it had to be either neutral enough not to be selected against or beneficial enough to be actively favored. And there are good arguments that it was beneficial. Apes are larger than monkeys, and they move differently. Rather than running along the tops of branches, apes tend to hang beneath them, swinging and climbing, using their arms as the primary means of locomotion. In that mode of movement, a tail isn't much use as a counterweight. Your center of mass is hanging below your grip, not balanced above it. A long tail becomes dead weight, an extra structure to grow and feed and drag around with no clear payoff. It's also possible that losing the tail was an early step toward something much bigger. Toward standing upright, toward walking on two legs, toward the entire body plan that eventually put your species on the moon. But here's what I want you to sit with for a second. The change did not happen because it was better. The change happened because a piece of junk DNA jumped into the wrong place. It happened by accident. And then, afterward, evolution found something to do with it. That's not the story we like to tell about ourselves. We prefer the version where every feature is honed and purposeful, where the human body is the product of relentless optimization, where we are the finished result of a long climb toward something. The reality is messier. The reality is that a large portion of what you are is the accumulated consequence of accidents that happened to be survivable. Your taillessness is not an achievement. It is a mutation that got lucky, and it came with a bill. Here's the part that most explanations leave out, and it's the part I find genuinely disturbing. When those researchers introduced the ape version of the TBXT gene into mice, the version with the ALU insertion, the mice lost their tails. But something else happened too. A significant number of the mice developed neural tube defects. Their spinal cords didn't close properly during development. In humans, that same class of defect has a name: spina bifida. Spina bifida is a condition in which the spinal column fails to close completely around the spinal cord during embryonic development. It affects roughly 1 in 1,000 births. It ranges from mild to severe, and in serious cases, it causes paralysis, nerve damage, and lifelong disability. And the genetics of tail loss appear to be tangled up in it. The same mutation that took away your tail may be part of the reason that human spines are, in a very specific and measurable way, more fragile than they should be. The developmental machinery that builds the lower spine was altered, hacked essentially by a piece of parasitic DNA, and the alteration did what it did, and the lineage survived, and here we are. But the machinery still occasionally fails in ways that trace back to that same ancient hack. Every year, thousands of children are born with spinal cord defects that may be, in part, the long echo of a 25 million-year-old genetic accident that made their ancestors tailless. That's the trade. That's what it cost, and it doesn't stop there. Think about your lower back for a moment. Think about how often it hurts. Back pain is one of the most common medical complaints on Earth, the leading cause of disability worldwide. Hundreds of millions of people at any given moment are dealing with a spine that is not doing its job properly. Slipped discs, compressed nerves, chronic pain that never fully resolves. Some of this is because we sit too much and move too little, but underneath that is a deeper problem. The human spine was never designed for what we ask it to do. It is a structure that evolved for horizontal four-legged movement and then got repurposed, hastily, imperfectly, into a vertical column holding up the entire weight of a large-brained animal walking on two legs. And the tailbone sits right at the bottom of it, the coccyx. 3 to 5 fused vertebrae, the remnant of the tail, serving as an anchor point for muscles and ligaments in your pelvic floor. It has a job now, technically, but it's a job that was improvised. And when you land on it hard, it can fracture or bruise, and the pain is remarkable. And it can last for months, and there is very little that medicine can do about it. You are, in a real sense, still feeling the consequences of a structural decision your ancestors' bodies made before your species existed. And when you get goosebumps, or when your appendix inflames, or when your wisdom teeth crowd a jaw that isn't big enough for them anymore, you are feeling the same thing. You are a body full of compromises, full of parts that used to do one thing and now do another, or nothing, full of leftovers from earlier versions of yourself. The tail is just the most obvious one because you can feel it. Sit still for a moment and shift your weight, and you can locate the place where the base of your spine ends. That's it. That's where it would have been. Now, let me bring this back around to the thing that started it. Somewhere in the first 8 weeks of your existence, before you had eyes that worked, before you had a functioning brain, when you were an unfinished cluster of cells being assembled according to instructions written millions of years before you were conceived, your body built a tail. It built it because the instructions to build a tail are still there. They were never deleted. They were just interrupted. Your genome still contains the developmental program for growing a tail, and in the earliest stages of your development, that program runs. And then a different program kicks in and shuts it down. Cell death is triggered, the structure is dismantled, and the vast majority of the time, that process works perfectly, and you are born without a tail like everyone else. But not always. Very rarely, a handful of documented cases in the medical literature, a human being is born with a tail, an actual one. Sometimes just a small, fleshy protrusion. Occasionally something more structured, with muscle and nerve tissue capable of movement. The program didn't fully shut down. The old instructions ran a little longer than they were supposed to. And a child arrives in the world carrying 25 million years of history in a body part that was supposed to be gone. Those cases are almost always surgically corrected, and understandably so. But I find something extraordinary in the fact that they happen at all. It means the blueprint is intact. It means that the thing your ancestors lost is not gone from you. It is dormant, suppressed, held down by a single genetic accident that happened to a primate in Africa before there were humans, before there was language, before there was anything that could have understood what was happening. You carry the instructions for a tail in every cell of your body. You always have. They are simply never allowed to finish. So the next time you feel that ache at the base of your spine, or you slip and land hard and feel that particular specific pain, remember what you are feeling. You are feeling the end of something, the last stub of a structure that helped keep your ancestors alive in the treetops for tens of millions of years, and that was taken away from them not by design, not by improvement, not by any grand evolutionary purpose, but by a stray piece of DNA that fell into the wrong place and broke something. And it worked. That's the part that I keep coming back to. It broke, and it worked, and here you are, walking upright on 2 legs with a spine that hurts and a tailbone that serves almost no purpose, reading these words with a brain that might never have grown so large if that ancient accident hadn't happened. You are not the product of a plan. You are the product of a mistake that got away with it. And so is everything else about you.